Good evening, virtual visitors. My name is Shakia Gillette. I am the director of the African American History Initiative here at the Missouri Historical Society. Welcome to our program and thank you for joining us this evening. Safety is a top priority, so nearly all of our programming is virtual right now. But the museum is open Wednesday through Sunday with several safety precautions in place. And we would love for you to visit if you feel safe in doing so. Advance reservations are required to visit all of the Missouri Historical Society locations. Please visit mohistory.org to plan your visit and reserve your free tickets. While you're at the museum, you can visit our newest exhibit, Beyond the Ballot, St. Louis and Suffrage, presented by Wells Fargo, which showcases not only St. Louis's role in the suffrage movement, but also highlights 32 local women who made an impact in St. Louis prior to gaining the vote. Before we get started, I need to quickly mention a few details about tonight's program. This will be a roughly 1 hour panel discussion, and we welcome questions from you, the viewers. You can submit questions through the Q&A button in your toolbar, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. Tonight's presentation is being recorded, so if you'd like to view it again or share tonight's presentation with others, it'll be posted on our Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel early next week. Your feedback is always important to us. We would really appreciate it if you could answer a few questions for us after the program. A Kobo Toolbox survey will soon appear in another tab, so keep your eye out for it and be sure to take the survey once this program is over. I know that some of you are watching our Missouri Historical Society members, so thank you. We are grateful for your support, and if you're not a member, we would love for you to consider joining us. You can see a link to our website, which is posted in our chat box. We also sincerely thank the city and county residents for your tax contributions through the Zoo Museum Tax District. So thank you once again. And with that, I'd like to start the program tonight with a little bit of history to put our conversation in some context. As I referenced previously with the Beyond the Ballot exhibit, the history of women's activism in St. Louis began long before 1920, when Missouri ratified the 19th Amendment and gave women the right to vote. Women have always been a fundamental, but often forgotten part of this region's past. In some respect, women are often portrayed as secondary characters in the city's formation, but were actually key to the establishment, survival, and growth of St. Louis. Today's program asks the question, what are we fighting for? And I believe that question not only resonates with the foremothers of the equality movement, but leaders of contemporary movements that we see today. As we continue to ponder this question, we are catapulted into thinking about the stories and untold legacies of women who are often overlooked throughout the quest for suffrage. It is no secret that the contributions of Black women in the suffrage movement have been overshadowed by their white counterparts throughout academia. But thanks to the movement of Black scholars, such as the late Rosalind Terborg Penn, and most recently, Martha Jones with her forthcoming book, Vanguard, How Black Women Broke Barriers, Won the Vote, and Insisted on Equality for All. These scholars have helped to shed light on the voices of Black women within the struggle for women's rights. Their research has helped to put into context the duality of the struggle for Black women, who not only saw the suffrage movement as a way to obtain the right to vote, but also as a means to fight against oppression and racism. Ultimately, racism is what separated white and Black women during the movement. The National American Women's Suffrage Association, founded in 1890, prevented Black women from attending their conventions. Black women often had to march separately from white women in suffrage marches. including the Women's Suffrage Parade of 1913. Additionally, when Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony wrote the history of women's suffrage in the 1880s, they featured white suffragists while largely ignoring the contributions of African American suffragists. Honoring Black suffragists means first acknowledging how they were sidelined from the mainstream suffrage movement, whose leaders feared alienating white women and losing support in the South. That exclusion spurred the formation of separate organizations, such as the National Association of Colored Women, founded in 1896 in the nation's capital. Prominent Black suffragists, such as Mary Church Terrell, led the group and also went on to help to found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in 1909 in New York City. Much like the movements throughout history, the cost of achieving the ultimate goal of obtaining the vote came with casualties, and that included leaving the needs of Black women out. By the time the 19th Amendment was ratified in August 1920, Americans were fully aware that Black women would remain largely disenfranchised. The amendment did not seek to eliminate barriers such as the poll tax and literacy test to uplift Black voters. As we know, this didn't happen until 45 years later with the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As we continue to honor the foremothers of past and present struggles to be seen and heard, we acknowledge local leaders such as Arsenia Williams and Victoria Clay Haley, who were founding members of the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA. Together, they opened the suffrage school in June of 1919 to teach women how to register to vote. And Lucy Bledsoe Gilmore, who was an early member of the St. Louis Citizens League, which helped to elect Black political candidates and countless others. Beyond the suffrage movement, other efforts towards women's equality continue to ignore the needs of Black women. The Equal Rights Amendment was originally proposed by Alice Paul and the National Women's Party in 1923 as the next step after suffrage. Black leaders urged the group to focus on state-level protection of voting rights for Black women, but that advice was not heeded. Many working women were also opposed to the ERA at the time because they feared it would strike down certain labor protections that pertain specifically to women. The refusal to listen to voices of non-white and non-middle class women left support for the ERA fractured, and it fell by the wayside for decades until it was reintroduced by Congresswoman Martha Griffin in the early 1970s and passed by Congress in 1972. It was ratified by 34 states in 2 years, but ultimately ended up failing again due to a counter movement called Stop the ERA, led by St. Louisan Phyllis Schlafly, which convinced state lawmakers that the ERA would in fact be bad for women. The second wave of feminism, which included the fight for the ERA, was more inclusive, looking to the civil rights movement and the leaders for inspiration and putting more emphasis on anti-racism work. But these efforts were often clumsy, and as a whole, the movement continued to privilege the concerns of white middle-class women who were largely focused on challenging domestic roles and women's rights to work. For Black women, many of whom already worked outside the home, this was not a major concern. And while both Black and white women advocated for reproductive rights, for Black women, those rights included stopped forced sterilization, which was not a priority for the mainstream women's movement. In response, some Black feminists formed their own organizations and decamped to create womanism. Today, we are pleased to welcome 3 inspiring women who continue to blaze the trail paved by those fearless women who came before us. I'd like to invite my colleague, Emily Underwood, to join me, as well as our panelist for the evening, who I will introduce to you right now. So please join me in welcoming Nadida Amatuala Mateen is a community activist who believes we can all be change agents to give voice to the unheard. She is the founder and executive director of the Abdul Wakil M. Kamal Memorial Foundation, a nonprofit created in 2013 after the death of her stepson, who was a victim of police violence. The foundation offers employment opportunities and education focusing on various trades as well as life skills to individuals returning home from prison. It also addresses mental health, alcohol, and substance abuse. She also founded the Mateen House, a home that provides direct service to women surviving from trauma of human trafficking. Besides spearheading two not for profit organizations, she is a member of Mobilize Missouri and the League of Women Voters. And she was on the planning committee for the 2018 and 2019 St. Louis Women's March. Amy Hunter is a longtime community activist and a diversity and inclusion specialist with expertise in critical race theory. In her career, she has held positions overseeing diversity and inclusion at St. Louis Children's Hospital and as Director of Racial Justice for the St. Louis YWCA. Her work has been published in journals and magazines, including Essence, where she wrote about the protests in neighboring Ferguson following the death of Michael Brown in 2014. And she also delivered 2 TED Talks, Lucky Zip Codes and a Wakanda Education. Amy has been on the planning committee for all of the St. Louis Women's March events. And lastly, Miss Mary Ferguson. She currently works as the Racial Justice Director for the YWCA of Metro St. Louis and has previously worked at a number of private and public universities, both in a teaching capacity and as a diversity and inclusion officer. She has also held positions with the Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, and the American Youth Foundation. Locally, she has served in equity-focused organizations, including the National Conference for Community and Justice, the Anti-Defamation League, Focus St. Louis, and the Diversity Awareness Partnership. She provided training for the Ferguson Commission through her business, Midwest Consulting Partners. Mary finds glimmers of hope, community, and purpose in pursuit of racial justice locally and globally. Please welcome our panelists. Hello, ladies. Oh, I think we're all muted.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello. Hi.
Welcome. So ladies, we just wanted to get started tonight by asking you all to share, just very briefly, your background with the Women's March, how you got involved with that, or if you were not involved in organizing it, what your experience was attending. And whoever wants to start can start. And Nadida, you look like you're ready.
That's me looking like I want to jump out of the room. No, good evening. Thank you for the invite. I am honored to be among such awesome women. And I started the St. Louis Women March truly by accident, as I think I told you guys the other night. From 2017, in 2018, it was widely circulated that the march wasn't going to happen. And someone invited me on a message thread to meet folks downtown at City Hall to see what we needed to do to make it happen. And I showed up, myself and another, we call ourselves March Sisters, showed up. And from there, we just all got together, congregated and made it happen in 12 days. At the end of the day, it was about 12 of us at the time, and we were able to bring about 15,000 people downtown St. Louis in those 12 days. So it was by accident, truly by accident.
I wish I could say that. We heard here in St. Louis, we heard there was a group forming. There was a group that had already started, but there were no women of color. And so we found out where they were meeting at Mokabees,
Yes.
which is a great place to meet for a lot of activism work. And there was a conversation about how could this be a women's march, and leaving women out of the conversation, Black women out of the conversation in particular. Lots of other women were being left out of the conversation. So women who identify as queer, lesbian were being left out of the conversation. Black women, Latino women, trans Black women were being left out of the conversation. So that was like a very heated conversation right before the very, very first march. And it was also a window in. I got roped in by Kit Roth, who was already on a committee, and said, I'll join, but I have to bring more people with me. So I invited Elizabeth Vega, some artists, like women of color. And so it was different because it was different. And I don't think it would have been different if people hadn't spoke up. A lot of young people spoke up that night. And like the speakers were different, and the march was different, and different in a great way, like more inclusive way. And it was a model. And certainly the second year when I met Nadita, it has been a model of how women of color and white women can work across racial lines towards women's equity. Like, this doesn't have to be an either or conversation. It can be a both and. So I'll let my ally, accomplice, partner in crime, Mary Ferguson. Speaking of women working across racial lines for women's equity, she is a very good example of that.
Thanks, Amy. I am the person of the panelists who really didn't have a role in the planning. I was very aware of what was going on the national level, the talk about the national march, because I am affiliated with a women's organization. So I was quite aware of that work and the role that our organization nationally was looking at, and then our organization, which is led by women of color in St. Louis. So I knew that they were involved, and that my role would be to be supportive and show up as I was needed. The first year of the march, actually the YWCA in the Phyllis Wheatley building did host a resource session after the march. So I knew we had work to do supporting that kind of event, but I wasn't involved in the planning. I showed up knowing that that there were already activists and women of color in the St. Louis community that were pushing to make this moment and make the ongoing work be more reflective of all women and all women's experiences. So I was grateful for the work they were doing, and I wanted to show up to support that work.
Well, Mary, that is actually a perfect segue into our second question. So how does the St. Louis March differ from the National March?
I mean, we're better.
Obviously.
Obvious.
I heard a lot of controversy and political jockeying, and you know, I was not part of that. I know the National March came off and was quite successful, and actually marches worldwide came off that first January. So I was aware that there were there were differences between the platforms and the advocacy of many of the organizations that were involved nationally, and I think that was some of the tension there. But I think women had a real commitment and felt a real need to show some sort of solidarity in response to the way the election had gone and the concerns about what was facing women and women's issues in the upcoming sort of congressional season and all. And so I think there was a lot of give and take between organizations and understanding the ways that we can support each other.
Yeah, I definitely would say there was a political space around having women's voices being heard. And I think, and definitely in the first year, but each year following, there was lots and lots of conversation about who the speakers would be. And that has changed every single year. It's been a little different. I think the ways that it was similar is that we were really clear we needed to have Black trans women's voices in this space. And that has been consistent year after year. And young people's voices. I think we've probably lessened some of our politicians. The first couple of years, it was kind of all politicians. But I mean, understanding like this was in response to a major election and outrage around gendered issues. And so I think that was appropriate for the time, but I think we've also been flexible enough and we've stayed together. So the mess at the national level, we didn't have locally. We worked quite well together, a really small but mighty team. But I think some of the ways in which even the first group of organizers changed from the first year to the second and third year has been that having to have hard conversations with each other in a very loving way. And like making a very strong commitment to no matter what happens here, we're going to stay together.
And then we liked each other.
We did.
So it was easier for us to be able to have those challenging conversations with each other because it wasn't personal. It was, we need to get this done. You know, this segment of the population, their voice is not being heard. And the beauty of it is, it started as a political thing, but on the national level, these individuals it's really political, and political people were having a bigger voice than your everyday person. And with us, we were just everyday women, and we were intentional about what it was we wanted to be heard. Not only us being heard, but we wanted to really try to work across racial lines and close that gap, be able to have some measurable outcomes. And so that's what we did. At the end of the day, it was what are we feeling? What is it that we want to be said? And we were just intentional about it. And so we were able to do that. On the national level, it was a lot of chiefs, and no one was willing to be an Indian. So they just didn't work well together.
I don't know if we still use that analogy.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
My apologies. My apologies. I'm chief operating officer. You could be chief in a good way. In a good way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nidhi. That I know that's what you meant. Give you that opportunity to explain. I would just have one other go back, and that is that so much on the national level, we're looking at people that we've never met and maybe never will meet. And I just want to say, as a native St. Louis, and like, we have outstanding women here. Like, maybe they're not Michelle Obama, but they're close, you know, and maybe even next. So I do think there's something to be said about, you know, supporting the people in the places where you live and uplifting the women's voices where we are, because our local politics are very real, and the ways in which women's voices have been silenced nationally, you know, ripples down to our very St. Louis level. So, you know, I've had the opportunity to go to the National March, but it's on the same day as ours. So I miss it every year.
I wanted to, Nadita, some of the things you were saying lead right into another point we wanted to ask you about. And Amy, you also mentioned earlier that the Women's March locally, that was a really great example of women working together across racial barriers and racial lines. And so we just wanted to know more about that, how we as women can do better at that. Amy, we talked a little bit about this the other day. How can we do better about it and do better more consistently?
I mean, look, women, we're going to have to talk about racism. Like at the end of the day, yeah, we share a common thread around sexism. We understand that every one of us understands that, like, seriously, in our own personal lives, our mothers, daughters, sisters, friends' lives. And as women, we're going to have to talk about racism and how racism has divided us as women. And honestly, I think if we could get this together, like as women, like, we'd be unstoppable, like not just women's pay equity issues, but every issue we have around children, reproductive health, social justice activism, like all of those things, we could have real organized conversations and really mobilize in ways that we haven't been able to move. Instead of just fighting for, 60 cents on the dollar, we could all have a dollar, but we need to work together. And I think this moment in the suffrage movement is such a good example of how Black women didn't have to wait 40 more years to vote if the white women would have stayed, right? If the white women would have advocated for us as well, that we could all be celebrating this moment instead of just some of us. So we can make a difference though. I mean, I'm gonna offer, like, now's the time. Why not us? Why not now?
For me, being my authentic self is important to me. And so, and I believe I have a caring heart. I know I do. And what hurts my sister or my sister hurts me. And so we need to get there with that. I can't be free if my sister is in bondage. And I think if we start from there, and all of the other wrinkles will work out, right? Don't be afraid. Work on that fear. Be scared if you must, because it's scary. The unknown is very scary. But don't let it deter you. Make it be the reason why you get out the bed and do what you do every day. So, and that's what I live by. And if my sisters would do that, be unapologetic for it. I care about her baby not having something to eat tonight. I care about this family that, you drive past Wendy's right here on Gravois, and the whole family is outside. Care about those things. It doesn't have to be a community. It could be just one person, and I bet you'll see the ripple effects, because that's just how it goes. Try to be a light for someone who doesn't know that they're blessed, and work from there, and just do it. And that's all I got.
Mary, this is what a lot of your work focuses very much on. Can you speak a little bit about some of the discussions you have in your work?
Sure. Well, it's my work and it's very much my life too. So I don't separate the two. And I think that gives me what Nadita said, the push to get up in the morning and say, this is what I want to see the world be. And I think particularly for women, taking our own power seriously and saying, I can make it that way. I'm going to make it that way in my world. And then I'm going to work with in my case, work with a lot of white people to understand that the complex systems that have been set up to confuse us and separate us and confuse us about our own humanity and other people's humanity, really keeps us kind of chasing ourselves around, and we have to make a decision that we're not going to buy into that, and that we are going to do it with some, if we're white, with some humility, and learn to listen and to follow and to be curious in a way that's genuine and authentic, and respectful, not consuming other people's pain or their experiences or their culture, but being open to that learning. And for me, I've been so incredibly lucky and privileged to be surrounded in so many instances. Some of it is places I chose to work, and I worked, and they were full of Black women who were willing to partner with me and teach me and lead me and befriend me and explain things to me and tell me to stop doing some things that were irritating. And so that ability to build relationships, it's like a muscle, and it's like an exercise that I found I had to just do over and over and over again. And it becomes easier and less daunting. I think Nadita used the word fearful, and I think there is fear there. I think it's more about fear about not knowing what to do and not knowing how I'll come off or be perceived. But some of that is that humility. You have to let that go and just go for the human connection, and do your own work. And that's important, particularly as a white person doing cross-racial work. I have to do the both and that Amy was talking about. I have to do my own work so that I enter the cross-racial work with a better grounding and a better set of skills and more knowledge. And there's no penalty for white people not knowing how to do this generally. And so it can feel difficult when it feels that you're making mistakes all the time. And you want to go back to the way where you didn't have to feel like you were making mistakes, but there's so much more to gain. There's a whole world of women out there that I want to connect to, and I want to learn from, and I want to have fun with. And so putting the difference between us center, as Amy said, addressing racism, it's the work we need to do, because we're not going to move forward if we're not together.
Once again, Mary, with the segue for the next question. Actually, I think we really just want to flesh out some of the details that all three of you just mentioned moments ago. So what issues are at the forefront for women today, and how do you prioritize those goals?
Ooh. Personally, sometimes I think we get in our own way, and a lot of it stems from fear. And especially if we're not comfortable in our own skin for various reasons, right? And so you allow, again, that fear to make you stagnant, stay placed, because you don't know what's on the other side of that door. I always say I'm ignorant enough to not know what I don't know, and just see what happens. I know what I want to do. I know the outcome that I want, So I have to just work through whatever it is I'm feeling internally, and whether that's with a sister who knows me and who can talk me out of my own way, or if it's one of my sisters who do it. And at this point, for real, I don't even know if there's a real difference, besides, especially with the women that I've come to love and care about that were part of the Women March planning committee. They are, when George Floyd was killed, I had one of the March sisters in the hospital texting me to ask me, was I okay? And she's the one that's in the hospital. It can happen. And it's a beautiful thing when it happens. Like, it like makes you want to weep and cry and like, oh, I did that. I don't now I'm ready for the next time, the next challenge with somebody else or someone else. And because we're juggling, we got all kinds of things going on, right? For me, I mean, my husband is a Black man. My grandson is this 15-year-old boy, and so I fear, especially after 2016, I fear for them every day. But I can't stop doing what I know needs to be done. That fear is real, but I still got to keep going because it won't always be there, so just waiting for the next challenge. I think we just need to get out of our own way. And especially if we're trying, then it can be done. It can happen. Women, we absolutely rock. But what if, just get out of our way. Just take it one day at a time. We'll get there. Honestly, God, believe that.
Yeah, I think the issue that prevents us from moving forward is, I think fear is there, but the fear is there because the violence is there, at least the threat of violence. And that is something, a common thread that women share, and certainly another thread around what racism looks like as violent. And, it's hard to be violent when you have a crew. And so I would offer, us standing in solidarity looks a lot like that. Like, whether we're talking about the Me Too movement and what that looks like in the workplace, or whether we're talking about mothers standing in solidarity for the ending of violence on our children, whether it's in a school, a healthcare system, or in mass incarceration, police, whatever that is. I think whether you biologically are a mom or not, I think what women share is a love for people, and a clear understanding that violence is not the only answer to how to solve a problem. And I've said publicly, as I think about the women who were there during Ferguson, standing in solidarity for Mike Brown, and certainly there for Leslie and his sisters and all the women that touched him, right? They weren't afraid of getting tear gas and pepper sprayed. What they were afraid of is that they would have a turn. And fear certainly motivates me a lot, but it motivates me to move instead of standing still, because if I stand still, if we all stand still, what we will all suffer under is the systemic and institutionalized violence that happens to women and the threat of violence that happens to women. I think once we can articulate that, say it in such a way, not only will that give us clarity on what we're all working against, we are all working against the violence of humanity, and that includes the violence of racism, then the ways in which we need to work together is just that much more clear. And our fear is that things will stay the same forever, not that they will change. I don't think women are necessarily afraid of the change, even though we can't see it. I think if we are allowed to have the space to focus on our own liberation and the liberation of people who look like us, our sisters, right? That kind of joy, that kind of reverent imagination for what could be is, I think, inherent to who we are as women. And so, I don't think Navid is moving out of ignorance. I think she is moving out of courage. And I think that courage gets named as such. that if you need somebody who's going to stand in solidarity, I think all of us on this call probably have at least one woman we can call in a moment of crisis that is there for us. And that, you know, if you multiplied that by millions of women, how much more powerful that would be. And so I will ask people to break up with their relationship with racism. I know it looks like you get a lot when you're in bed with racism. I'm going to offer you get way more when you break up. You can have like real love, but you have to break up. Like you have to make that conscious decision. Like I'm no longer going to be held hostage to the violence that is perpetuated, particularly on the lives of women. And I need us to like look around at each other and know that I got your back. I got your back all the time.
I want to interject for a second. I was curious, we're talking about fear and courage and all of those things, and maybe the connection I'm making in my mind is not accurate, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. We spoke the other day, and one of the things that came up was the relationship between women and anger, or women and getting mad. And so I wanted to ask about if you see a connection between those fears and those things that hold people back and the sort of socialization that women have around anger and the expression of anger.
Ooh. Yeah. Just speaking all those words about anger and fear, you can see it brings up stuff for us. I'm going to go back to early socialization of girls about being nice and being quiet and being helpers and the ways that all of those things are not bad things to be, but we can also be angry about things and notice when things are unfair, as young people are quick to point out. They are very attuned to noticing inequity and will speak up and get indignant, and somehow over the years and over the processes of schooling and a lot of other things, girls are directed to in a way, the only sort of acceptable anger that they can show is really the internalized stuff. I'm thinking of Mean Girls, you know, the take it out on each other kind of phenomenon that comes up, that I don't believe is inherent to girls. I think it's part of how we let them show the parts that feel, you know, just fed up with the way things are, but not so supported in showing that. And I come from the era even pre-Title IX, so we couldn't, you know, hit a ball around or kick a soccer ball because the boys did that, but we didn't have that. So I think there are ways that it's an early lesson for women not to show anger, and then because violence is used against us in ways with anger attached to it, I can see why these reactions and the emotional response that comes from us even thinking about anger can be pretty complicated.
Brittany Cooper describes some of this in her book Eloquent Rage, and talks about the ways it gets masked around sarcasm. You know, even the slights that we give each other when we know something sexist has happened, we have a certain look that we give to each other, like coded, codified ways of survival. no, I think it's fine for women to get angry. I probably encourage it, you know, a little more, because the truth is that we are mad, and that the space around change for equality may have gotten stifled, but I would offer it's not dead. I mean, I think about even during the suffrage movement, you know, they withheld sex, they protested, they were angry. I think about the civil rights, nonviolent, cute coding language that we have. But you know, in order to sign up to get beat at a lunch counter, you have to be angry. You have to be fed up with the system the way that it is. And so I would offer, you know, what would this world look like if women got mad? How different would schools be? Would children all be able to eat and have one-to-one technology during COVID-19? And not just mad for our own children, but all children. I think that's the place around regaining the connection within our own community and our own humanity, that we're born to advocate for ourselves. Like that's inherent. Babies do not apologize for crying at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're like, oh, were you sleeping? Like, I'm hungry, right? Like, I don't really care what you were doing because now it's about me. So I'm going to offer, like, the reason why we don't give the talk to our daughters like we give it to our sons is because by the time they're driving, we've already stolen their spirits. They wouldn't dare speak up. But what if we could have it, claim it back? What if we could get it back? What if that is the gift that we give to young women, is that we don't ask for their voices. We don't steal them from them. We don't coach them out of them. We don't take them from them. We allow them to be heard. And I think in some ways the Women's March at least allowed that platform to happen on that day. And so I think it's important that we keep modeling that it is possible, and that people get to be a witness to what that looks like. And then maybe a witness to what liberation also looks like, so that you get used to it and it feels good. And eventually it feels like your favorite song playing on the radio, right? That's what it would look like for me.
I say angry all the time, so just because you can't. I try to reel it in when it needs to be, but that I work on that anger just like I work on that fear. Right? To me, they're pretty much, and they can look alike a lot of times with me. So I will, yeah, if I'm mad, I'm going to say I'm mad. Muhammad knows. I have him trained now. He knows I'm mad. He's not going to say anything because I can't work constantly on it. So I have to hold it for it to mobilize me to do what I need to get done. I get mad that children are going to bed hungry, that their lights are being cut off, that their water is being cut off, that they're being evicted. Those things. So I'm angry about that because we should not be in this space right now. It's 2020, and people still have lost their jobs, about 30 million of them. And so sometimes that anger says, you know, that's not, I still have my job. I've been working from home since March, but my sister doesn't have hers. Her kids may be hungry. So that's going to kind of piss me off. And I'm going to use that anger to do what I think needs to be done, to meet her where she is and say, here's this for you and your babies. So we have every right to be angry, and it shouldn't be questioned. I think our sisters should see that because they suffer the same thing, just not as overt as it is with us, but they suffer those things too. But yeah, use that anger to mobilize you. Use it to ask for help when you need it. Do that part too. I honest to God, I want us to get there. I have granddaughters. I want them, and we talk like we talk. You're mad, say you're mad. But now what are you going to do about it? So use it to work in your favor and in the favor of someone else?
That was a great discussion piece, ladies. So now I'm wondering, in my mind, I'm just thinking about everything that we just talked about. And Nadita, you just mentioned asking for help. What does healing look like for women right now? What does that look like? How can we use some of the things that we just mentioned to further some of the action items, further our goals, but also heal ourselves in the broader text of what we see happening with women today?
Oh boy.
I really struggle with this language sometimes. I'm just gonna be like super honest. Like I feel like we want to have this healing conversation, but we're like still in this abusive relationship, right? So if this were an abusive relationship, our relationship with racism and sexism is an abusive relationship. And so if you were still in the relationship, I wouldn't be like, well, while you're in this abusive relationship, how can you heal yourself? I'd be like, you need to get out, right? Like, let's move you, take you out, take them out, whatever. But this situation needs to change, like today, right? And so I feel like I'm cool with celebrating and having a party when we're done. I'm not really interested in the in-between parties, right? I'm just not. I feel like I feel like we as women get scripted a lot to settle for what we can get instead of scripted like our male counterparts to keep asking for what we want. Because anything is possible. My male counterparts don't walk around afraid to walk into their homes or afraid they're going to get raped. My sons, who are young men, are not walking around afraid. They're not. And I have one daughter who's always afraid, right? So I feel like take care of yourself so you can keep fighting. I encourage people to cry once a day, at least once a week. You should cry, get it out. But that's only to get it out so you can keep fighting. Like not so that you can lay down and take it. Nah, get some sleep, right? Like we would tell any young person going to school, hey, make sure you get your rest. That's so that you are prepared for the struggle ahead of you, and committed to stay in this fight until we win. This whole like super celebrating stuff that we're doing, I'm not interested. It's like copping out to say like, I don't think we can get there, so we're just gonna have a little party right now. I'll wait for graduation. I don't want a party for my freshman year. I want to finish, get it, be done with it and moving on, right? Like when do we like unleash this racism, sexism, intersectionality conversation? I can assure you, I don't even know what Pinterest really is, but I'm going to spend some time with it. But let's first end racism and sexism. Well, plenty of spa days then.
Yeah, I think I take the little wins, but that just makes me thirsty for more of those wins. So now it's oh God, that felt so good. And now I got to move on to the next thing, the next issue, I want to get the next win. So I'll take the little wins in the interim so I can get to the healing at the end of when it's all done. And only God will know when that will be. So take the little wins to wait for the bigger, the success, the healing part. When I could, I said the other day, I can breathe. I'm waiting to exhale, and I don't know when that part is going to be. So, yeah, I don't know what healing looks like.
I mean, I'm clear about what it looks like. I just want to offer that if we're going to really have this conversation across racial lines with women, we're going to have to start being really honest to say, until you stop oppressing me, I can't get fully there and you can't get there either, and like quit acting like white women can't handle that because they can. I think sometimes it's a confusion about what is, right? But like we're having this conversation about women not working together, but part of the reason why women aren't working together is because we can't have an honest conversation about what's actually happening to women and what is happening to women racially. If we could have that honest conversation to say, hey, as a white woman, I need you to be an ally and an advocate and an accomplice with me, right? Not just, because the Women's March women weren't just allies, they were accomplices. Like, we were doing something we were all worried we were getting fired for, but they were in it with me, right? It wasn't just me, it was them too. And I feel like, but that's how, 15,000 people show up, is when the accomplices get together and are committed to one another. And I think that's Black women can't heal with white women's oppression. We have to agree. I'm going to work on not oppressing you so that you can heal, like, and not like in this charity kind of moment, but like in this radical social justice, like, I'm down for the cause kind of place. I'm looking at Mary Ferguson. She's so down, right? Like, there's not a question, not a doubt. I know wherever she is, she's going to be down, right? And so I think, but like, I need like a million Marys, not just one. I need a million of them. And I know, because I'm witnessing like who she is and like how bad she is, right? To say like, it's possible. Like, if I hadn't seen her, maybe I'd be a little confused right now. Maybe I'd be a little sketchy or iffy on whether or not this is possible. But like, I have living proof of what this actually looks like and how this actually works. So I'm not asking for something that's impossible. So, sorry, Marion, I jumped in.
No.
I know as women, we get scripted, like, it's your turn, it's my turn, it's your turn.
No, and how could I not want you to say those things that I want to hear? So thank you. But I think what I take from that is I take seriously my role then, because of my relationship with you and other women I know, to say to white women that I know, particularly a lot of younger women, let me help you. Let me show you. Let me explain what I did. It may not be your way, but it's worked pretty well. And I have to say this for white women. Part of it is you've just got to keep showing up. That was part of the, my not excitement about the Women's March is like, well, I've been showing up for a lot of stuff. I'll show up for this too. But when this isn't the priority, I'm still going to show up, and this is still my priority. So this idea of being consistent, persistent, not ever thinking you're done. And if you think you are, then help some people who are coming along get to the places and get in the doors that you can get in, because there is something that comes with that consistency over the years, is you can get indoors. And I tell people I'll do this work till I die, but I also don't want to be doing the work the same way all the time. I am ready to bring others along, and I want to bring others along. And I find great satisfaction and joy in that. So I tell people I'm a middle child. So my question in life is always, who's going to play with me? So I'm looking for other people to play with me, and particularly other women white and women of color, who want to engage with each other authentically, joyfully. Amy and I can laugh together more than almost any other time in my life when we're sitting and doing serious work, but we enjoy each other, we appreciate each other, and there's joy that comes from that, and fun and shared history. And I really want to see and think of my work as extending this to other women in particular. Like Amy says, once you know it, once you have it, you're like, oh, everybody should have this. Yeah, this would be fun. Yeah.
Well, ladies, we are coming up on 1 hour. And I wanted to just get your final thoughts. Nadita, I know we did not work in the pink hats, but if you wanted to include pink hats in your final thoughts,
The
we can
pink
also
hat.
do that. But I'd like to get final thoughts from each of you before we close out.
Okay, so let's talk about those pink hats because they did show up. They even showed up in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I did see some pink hats, but there was a big deal about those pink hats, and I still don't understand the rationale why they made such a big deal about them. They told me I couldn't wear them. I'm like, okay, and I would say those were my sisters who had an issue with the pink hats, but we'll talk about that the next one. This was a really good conversation. It really didn't even, it just felt like a conversation. It didn't seem like I was just sitting around talking to some friends. And they are always needed. These conversations should never stop. We should continue to have them. We should always bring our authentic selves when we do. And we are going to say some things wrong. And that's okay. And know that it's okay. The win is worth it. And the healing can start. At least glimmer is ahead. And the celebration is at the end of it too, whenever that may be. We can do this. I firmly believe that. So again, thanks for the invite. And always, always a pleasure to see Amy and Mary, because I've had them in the hot seat a few times and they've never said no to me. And so thank you, ladies. And we should continue to do that conversation too. So thank you, ladies. I'm done.
I can go next. And Amy, you want to have the last word?
I'm still thinking, so yes.
Okay. Well, I am too, but I'm just going to open my mouth anyway. Yeah, I think the reflection on women's suffrage and the Women's March and your exhibit Beyond the Ballot, I think we need to think in all those realms. We need to think about the political activism, the history of how we have been to each other and treated each other, and we need some reconciliation and apology for some of the things that have been done, some of the ways that sexism has taught us to not support each other as women, and then as Amy has pointed out, how racism has taught us not to support each other as women who have different racial identities. And so that idea of there's no sphere that we're not in, we can have such an impact. We are untapped potential. And I think, unfortunately, as things collapse, as we see the economy collapsing, as we see healthcare under stress, as we see so much in crisis in the country, we are starting to notice the critical roles that women have played and are playing. You know, it's not inconsequential that two fields, nursing and teaching, women predominate in those fields. They've been asked to sacrifice, and they're saying, wait a minute, things better get better here. We need to do some things about the way things are in crisis. And so I think, and just, you know, it's the week of the convention. So I get to think about women leading and saying, enough is enough. You know, we're going to take control of some things, and we're going to show you a different way to do things. So I think that's what I appreciate about being around these women is they say, I'm going to show you a different way of doing things, and I'm not waiting. I'm not asking for permission. We're doing this. Come on, do you want to do it with me? And I think that's the spirit that I hope people feel and will take from this talk that we've had together.
That was great. I could listen to you guys all night. I was like, oh, that's good. What they said. I feel really good about that. I kind of do feel good about it. I mean, we need to break up with patriarchy and violence and stand in solidarity together. I think we're going to be so much further faster than that. I think I encourage women to have conversations about race, just women having conversations about racism. And I think that includes definitely some forgiveness, for ourselves and each other and ways that we've internalized it. I mean, it took me 45 years to go natural, so I get it. Yeah, I get it. It didn't happen overnight. I had to figure some stuff out about me. And so there's no shame or blame in that. I think the benefit that we have when we as women are working in solidarity will benefit everyone. Will benefit children, the next generations, ourselves, the people that we love, other women. And so I feel like if we could get together, and I asked Roxanne Gay when she was in town, like, is there any place in the United States where Black and white women are working across racial lines? And she said no. And so I said, well, we should do it here in St. Louis. Like, why not here? Why not us, right? We've got some other markers, Dred Scott and Ferguson. We could be the model for like how we get this right. And I think if women could get organized and would get organized consistently, not just for a march or not just for a session or a meeting, but like for life. I just think all the people that we touch and all the people that we love would be just that much better off. And in the ways in which we are scripted to do that for other people, I would offer a resistance of sexism. Audre Lorde's word is self-care is an activism and resistance, and that we could just take care of ourselves and each other and everything else would work out. So hopefully, we spend some time doing that and strategizing around how we can get close, like all the time.
That's such a nice way to close out. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all so much for just spending part of your evening with us and sharing all of your perspectives and wisdom with us. I'm going to take a second to share a screen because, of course, we have to give our thanks to our sponsors and things as well. So I want to thank excuse me, there we go. Once again, the sponsors, Wells Fargo sponsored the Beyond the Ballot exhibit, and all of the sponsors who are supporting programming, especially tonight, the Women's Foundation, who is supporting the series, this Movements and Moments series that this program is a part of, that we're offering during the Beyond the Ballot exhibit. Thank you to all of you who are viewing this tonight. Hope you go back and watch it again later and maybe share it out with some family and friends as well. I think it was a great conversation. Don't forget to fill out the survey that should have popped up in your browser and let us know what you thought. And we hope to see you again. We've got some more programs coming up soon. So hope you can make it. And thank you again to all of our wonderful panelists. And Shakia, thank you for setting up the evening so nicely for us with the presentation at the beginning.
Thank you, ladies. And thank you, visitors.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.